The indictment of former President Donald Trump and his arraignment tomorrow in a Manhattan courthouse has many asking, is America slipping toward being a banana republic where those in power use their power to keep their power? You know, no one is above the law, but using the judicial system to target political opponents instead of prosecuting crime is not only a misuse of the judicial system, it's un-American. Abuse of power was among the many factors that led House Republicans to establish the subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government. Now, how should this subcommittee respond to such abuses? Well, join me now to discuss this and much more, Congressman Mike Johnson. He serves on the House Judiciary Committee, including its subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government, and the House Armed Services Committee. He represents the 4th Congressional District of Louisiana. Mike, welcome back to the program.
Hey, Tony, great to be with you as always.
So instead of prosecuting criminals, it appears the Manhattan prosecutor, Alvin Bragg, is targeting a political opponent. What does this say about the integrity of our judicial system?
Well, it's in great jeopardy right now, and it's a true and real concern to all of us, and it should be to all Americans, regardless of how you feel about Donald Trump as an individual. This is a perversion of our system, and when you see a district attorney like this, of this stature, in America's largest city, using his office to go after a political opponent, it really makes people question the veracity of the system overall. And that's a real concern in a constitutional republic like ours.
So Mike, his attorney said that, you know, if this were, Joe Smuckatelli, this would not even be a thing. Your response?
No, it would not, of course. Everybody has heard by now that these charges are pretty bogus. Even in a best-case scenario, they would be misdemeanors. And so the Alvin Bragg, the DA there, is trying to bootstrap them to felony charges to make this whole case. But it doesn't hold any water. Remember that federal prosecutors who don't like Donald Trump have already reviewed these charges, and they said it was just too far removed. It'd be too difficult, too novel of a case to even try. But Alvin Bragg has ignored all of that, and he's going to do it anyway. Why? Because he wants to be famous, because he wants to be the center of attention. I think ultimately, Tony, what they have calculated, the left, and they're controlling Alvin Bragg, because remember, he was Soros funded. That's how he got there. They've made a calculation that by maybe elevating Trump in this way would energize the base, which it is, and probably ensure that he gets the nomination on the Republican side again. And then they calculated, Tony, I think, that they can beat him in the general election. So I'm not so sure about that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think this could backfire them, but I do believe that is a proper evaluation of their political calculation. But this man, Donald Trump, is probably the most probed individual on the planet. I mean, you think during his last 2 years, I mean, there were actually during the time that the Democrats held Congress, there were 50 probes into Donald Trump and his administration. I mean, we remember Russiagate, the Mueller investigation, all of these things, impeached twice, and nothing came of it.
Well, that's right. And I served on both of those impeachment defense teams in the House. We knew that those were bogus charges. Remember, they've been after Donald Trump since he famously came down that golden escalator back in early 2016, whenever that happened. They wanted to impeach him before the man even took office. And so they hate him, and they hate what he stands for. And as somebody said, I think very aptly this week, I can't remember if it was maybe Mark Levin or somebody like that, noted that Donald Trump really isn't even an individual anymore. I think Glenn Beck said it. He is a symbol. He's a symbol of so many millions of American people who feel like they're being left behind by the government, who feel like they're looking at a two-tiered system of justice now, who feel like that their rights are being trampled upon. And you know what? In so many cases, Tony, they're exactly right.
Yeah, I can assure you, Mike, that had he governed the way he's been accused of living, we wouldn't have any of these lawsuits or any of these crimes being suggested, because the left would have loved him. That's the problem. He ruled there. He led like a conservative. His administration was conservative, and that is what they detest.
That's exactly right. And he speaks for the common man. I can tell you, in my district in Louisiana, we're all home in our districts this week, and we're talking with folks and doing town halls and being at events. I'm telling you, people are irate about this. They feel like, as you noted at the outset of the program, that the system of justice is being slanted and used for political purposes. And they're opening Pandora's boxes here, Tony, that are going to be very, difficult for us to close, and that's the concern going forward.
I agree. I mean, once you pierce the veil and you move into territory you've never been before, you'll go again. And what we're doing is we're tearing down the guardrails that have kept this republic in between the ditches, for 245 years. And I'm very concerned that, we're setting new precedents, new standards.
Well, we're in uncharted waters as a nation. There's no question about it. And those new barriers are mowed down, new ones every day. And so we're testing the limits of our republic. And there are certain foundations that you must maintain. And the people's faith in the system of justice is about the most essential of those. And so, because if people don't trust the system, Tony, they look to resolve their disputes on their own. Yeah. And that ultimately leads to chaos and anarchy. Right. We have to have the rule of law. That's why this is so very important.
Well, I want to move quickly to one of the elements of that, the subcommittee on the weaponization of the federal government. The hearing last week exposing the federal government working to basically violate the First Amendment speech rights of Americans.
We have overwhelming direct evidence that the Biden administration is using federal agencies in a whole of government approach to censor and silence conservative viewpoints that they disagree with. And we brought in the attorneys general of Louisiana, Jeff Landry, as you noted, and Eric Schmidt, who was the former attorney general of Missouri, now a U.S. senator. And they testified about their litigation, which is still ongoing, by the way, Missouri v. Biden. And they've had a ton of discovery and depositions and documents that they've been able to subpoena and gather. And it tells the story, Tony. We laid that out for the American people to see for themselves. There's no question about it. They first coerced, and then they colluded directly with the big tech platforms, at least 20 officials in the White House itself, to censor and silence conservatives online. And that happened. It is an objective fact. We've got to go forward and make sure this doesn't happen again in the future.
How do we do that?
Well, it's a great question. We're the House of Representatives. We have the majority. Republicans have the majority in just one House of Congress right now. We're using every tool in our toolbox. One is oversight. That's the hearings that you're seeing every week, almost every day now. We're laying out the facts for the American people to see it. Ultimately, the legislative purpose is to take what we learn and create legislative fixes to make sure the safeguards are in place so that this can't happen again. They can't weaponize all these agencies of the federal government. And ultimately, Tony, the big power that we have, of course, is the power of the purse. So it is likely, I think, increasingly likely, that some of these agencies are not going to be able to just take all the taxpayer funding they want and go and do these things. If they can't respect the Constitution, then we have to bring them to heel. And right. I mean that literally, and sometimes you got to use the power of the purse to do it.
Well, that's the only really tool that you have at present, because the DOJ is not going to prosecute themselves. It's not, the Biden administration will not indict themselves. So, we've got to control the purse strings, but very quickly, Mike, it may take an election to get an administration that will actually uphold the rule of law.
I think ultimately that's the solution, Tony. 2024 is for all the marbles. We have to get common sense conservatives elected. We have to have a majority in the Senate, the House, and the White House, too, or we're not going to fix this.
Congressman Mike Johnson, always great to see you. Thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today.
Thanks, my friend.